We're up to the second part of Genesis, the God who calls, and today we're looking at leading by example, and we're looking at this part of Genesis 12, verses 10 to 20. It's only 10 or 11 verses. But before we get to that, I want to ask you a question. And my question this morning is, do you think of yourself as a person of influence? I wonder what you would say about that. Like, do you think yourself as an influential person? Like we see this new term now. You might be familiar with the term an influencer. An influencer is a new term that is added to people on the internet who have a particular following, and it's generally young people. And many young people's goal and desire in life now is to be an influencer. And these people are influencing other people in ways that may or may not be good. But do you think of yourself as an influencer or an influence? And you might think to yourself, no. Well, then perhaps it doesn't matter how you live. Like if you don't consider yourself a person of influence, or you don't consider that you're influencing anybody else's lives, maybe in your mind that gives you a ticket to behave in any way you want to do. So that's what we're kind of getting to today. So I've put together a map because I think I'm a visual person, and we were talking the other night in Bible study about, it was at Thursday morning's coffee. We were talking about how some people are visual learners and some aren't. I'm a visual learner, probably always have been, so it helps me to actually see things. So here is where we're going today. We're going to take a journey today where this passage takes us. Now, the story starts out over here in Ur of the Chaldeans, or Chaldees, or Chaldeans, however you want to say it. As I always say, how do you say it? Just fast and confidently. So it's Ur of the Chaldeans. But we're just going to call it Ur from here on in because we don't really need to say that whole mouthful. So this is a map of today. So the countries today, you'll see Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Iran. And that little slither there we were talking about last week is Israel. So that's what the world looks like today. So in today's terms, where they started out, so we have Terah is the father. He has 3 sons. He has Nahor, Haran, and Abram. And this is where the story starts off, which would be modern-day Iran or southern Iraq. It's a bit hard to tell. So this is where the story starts off, and this is how the passage starts. It starts like this. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. So that's where they were going. They were heading to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. So Terah takes Abram, his wife Sarai, and his grandson Lot from Ur to Canaan. At least that's where they thought they were going. But we're not told why, but for some reason they stopped halfway along the way in Haran. So here is our family. We have on the left, we have Terah, and then we have Sarai, then we have Abram, then we have Lot. Lisa tells me that's actually Lot. Lisa tells me that's Lot, and that's Haran, but that's Terah, but that's not how I did it. She should have told me that earlier, but that's because she put that together, not me, but that's okay. So here we have the family, and this is where they go. They go on a journey, right? So they go all the way from there up into Haran, which is today would be modern-day Turkey. Now we just look at that and go, oh yeah, they've just gone from there up to there. It's 1,000 kilometres. Now, 1,000 kilometres would be like walking from here to the Gold Coast. It's almost exactly 1,000 kilometres. Here to the Gold Coast. Now, put your hand up if you've ever walked to Huskisson. A few of you. What about Woolamaya? Anyone gone as far as Woolamaya? Oh, we've got a couple. How about Nowra? Anyone walked to Nowra? Then you certainly haven't walked to Sydney, or you certainly haven't walked to Queensland, have you? 1,000 kilometres. It's almost impossible to understand. Well, we're not told why they left, but I wonder why. I mean, here's a few reasons that people even today leave. Well, they leave for economic reasons. People leave from one area to go to another area for employment or better economic opportunity. Or for the same reason that plenty of people emigrate. You know, I just told you about that young Nepalese couple. They've come to Australia. They don't have kids yet, but they've come for what they would say a better life, or give their children a better life. So perhaps they looked at what they thought they were going to Canaan and went, that's going to be a better place and more opportunity. Or perhaps even back then God was preparing Abram, because that's where he was going to be going anyway. That's where he's going to get called out to. But why did they stop at Haran? Again, we're not told. Well, perhaps they came to Haran and went, this is good here. We like it here, because Haran was a crossroad, a trade crossroad. There was lots of people coming through there, so it would have been a place of great trade. So perhaps they got there and they became comfortable because it was working good for them. Or perhaps because Terah's age. He was old by this time. And perhaps it was just, the travelling was just too much. I mean, I can understand why if you walk from here to the Gold Coast, you'd say, I don't want to walk anymore. I don't want to go anymore. So perhaps that was the reason. They just said, enough, we don't want to go. So maybe it was that. Or could have been family, we're not sure. But while they're at Haran, we're told very briefly in Genesis 11:32 that Terah lived 205 years and he died in Haran. So even though they journeyed there, now we're left with Sarai, Abram and Lot. This is where God calls Abram. And then we're going back to last week now, because this is what last week, but I'm just trying to put together in a timeline of where we're going. So this is what we looked at last week. In Genesis 12, we get, the Lord said to Abram, go from your country, his country at the time was Haran, go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I will show you. And last week we looked at this, and we looked at the 4 promises that God gave to Abram. Land, nation, personal blessing and universal blessing. And we went through those. And we said that this was a very pivotal point in not just Abram's life, but in the history of mankind and the story of the Bible as a whole. This was a pivotal section where God started the unfolding plan of salvation for us. It started all the way back then. So that was last week's message. If you weren't here, you can go back and look at that on YouTube. And so they head down to, modern day Israel. They go to Shechem. And in Shechem, this is what we're told. Abram travelled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. So we're told the Canaanites are in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, and this is the second time, he says to him, to your offspring I will give this land. Now he's travelled from Haran down to Canaan, or modern day Israel, and then so he's already told him, I want you to leave your country and go to this other place. When he gets there, he says to him, look around, this is the land that I'm going to give not you, but your offspring. He doesn't have any children at this stage, but God says, this is the land that I'm going to give your offspring. This land I've promised you and spoken to you about, this is it. Here we are. This land of Canaan, this is the land that I'm going to give you. And then we travel on. He travels down to Bethel, and we're told at Bethel, we're still in Israel, we're still in Canaan. We're told that he makes another sacrifice to God, and then he goes down to the Negev, which is all part of Canaan, but just different parts again. We don't know why he moved around, but he did. Well, he's in the land of Canaan, and what was Canaan like? As a land, what was Canaan like? Remember, God drove the Canaanites out of their land. So they must have been bad. And we look at what Canaan was like back then, and here's a few things about Canaan. Well, who were their gods? They were Baal, Asherah, Molech, and El. These are the four gods that they used to worship. Now, what were the practices that they used to do? Because what their understanding of God was, that God was not a loving God. Not as we understand God to be a loving God, but what they understood God to be was a God that had to be appeased. That was the whole understanding of gods. If things were going bad for you, the gods weren't pleased. If things were going good for you, the gods are pleased. And so if there was famine, the crops weren't growing well, everything they did was about appeasing their gods. So they were involved in occultic practices like divination, sorcery, medium, spiritualism, consulting the dead. They had ritual prostitution, which was a thing back then. You would have shrine prostitutes, which just seems unfathomable to us. But that's how they used to operate. But the worst thing they did is they offered children sacrifices. I mean, just stop and think about that. So how it worked is if there was a famine or it wasn't raining, they'd say the gods weren't happy and it was all about fertility. So they would literally sacrifice their own children. Now, what would you think of somebody who sacrificed their own child? I mean, we cannot comprehend that. If you've had children, you'll know, you think of this helpless little baby and sacrificing it. Can you think of anything more evil? I mean, from time to time I'll hear in the news that a child dies at the hands of an abusive person, and it just makes you sick to the stomach. But this is voluntarily. This is intentional. And you might think those people deserve, there are many Christians who believe in capital punishment, and you might think, well, someone who kills their own child, surely they're deserving of death. I don't know what you think about that. But the land of Canaan was a hard place. It was not a nice place. It was not a kind place. It was believed that the people of Canaan, they didn't even look after their own kind. They didn't care about their fellow Canaanites. If they were sick or needed help, forgiveness, there was none of that. It was not a nice place to live. And when we look at the Bible and we see that the Israelites came in and God said to the Israelites, I want you to go in the promised land and drive the Canaanites out. Now, I know some people struggle with that. I do, because they think, how is that a loving God? But then you have to look at it from the point of view of a culture that was happy to sacrifice their own children. Not all cultures are equal. And this is something we get stuck in. You know, Jeff was saying about being politically correct. Not all cultures are equal. There are some cultures that treat people in a way that is evil. It's unthinkable. And I think it's fair that those people should be driven out and become a redundant culture. We don't want those things repeating. So there's that. Okay. So at this point, they're in Canaan and the Negev, and we're told in verse 12, verse 10, now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. So we don't know how long he was there. As soon as he got there, there's a famine. Today's message is called Leading by Example. What example did Abram do? What was his example to his wife and his nephew and all the other people that were part of his gathering, because he had a whole bunch of people with him? What did he do? Well, he was in a land that was in a famine, and we even know in our country we have droughts from time to time. This is the cycle of weather. Floods and droughts. This is a cycle of weather. This is how it works, and would have been no different there. He wasn't the only person that was suffering from this drought. Everyone there was. And everyone else seemed to stay there. It was only him that left. So what did he do? Well, this is what he did. He said, you know what? I'm not going to trust in God. I'm going to rely on myself. Even after God had come to him twice, once and said, I'm going to make you a great nation, you're going to have many offspring, and you're going to be a blessing. And then he comes to him again at Shechem and says, Abram, look around at this land, that this is going to become your promised land. Even after that, he doesn't trust God. stories like this that should encourage us. Because you would think, hang on, Abram is one of the, who becomes Abraham. Abraham is one of the men of faith. If you go to Hebrews 11, he's one of the people listed as one of the great people of faith. How do you go here? Not very good. It should encourage us. Every single person in the Bible or great figure that we see in the Bible failed time and time again. So what does he do? Rather than saying, no, I'm going to lead by example. God has promised this land to me. I'm going to stay here. He doesn't do that. He goes, you know what? I'm going to head down to Egypt. Why Egypt? Egypt was a place of great human advancement. Remember, this is a place who made pyramids. Still to this day, no one knows how they were made. Incredible ingenuity. It was the breadbasket. Egypt represented the opposite to God. Egypt represented the place where man was clever and it was self-reliant, and Abram thought, well, you know what? I'm not going to rely on God. I'm going to rely on man. Because I know if I go to Egypt, there's going to be food there because the Egyptians are very clever. And it's not the first time it happened. If you go to Isaiah 30, this is hundreds of years later, Isaiah says, woe to the obstinate children, declares the Lord, to those who carry out plans that are not mine, forming an alliance but not by my spirit, heaping sin upon sin. Why? Who go down to Egypt without consulting me, who look to help to Pharaoh's protection, to Egypt's shade of refuge. This is hundreds of years later. The people don't seem to learn the lesson. Well, so Abram seems to fail the faith test straight up, even though he was a great man of faith. He doesn't trust in God. He trusts in himself. He looks around and trusts in what he can see. Not the promise, but what he can see. Well, unfortunately, it gets much worse than that. Genesis 12 goes on. And as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say, you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. What a great idea. What could possibly go wrong? It's unbelievable. The great Abram, the great Abraham. I can just imagine he's walking down to Egypt thinking, I reckon as he got closer, there was another, 300 kilometres it says there, near to 200 to 300 kilometres, on his way going. And it was known that Pharaoh and often kings had things for women from other cultures and nations. That was a thing. They had a harem. They liked women from other cultures who looked differently. And he comes up with this plan. And as he's walking along, I think he comes up with this plan and he goes, hey, I know how we can get out of this. And can you imagine saying to your wife, he says to his wife, Sarah, what a beautiful woman you are. Like if that's where it ended, that'd be good, wouldn't it? You are stunning. You are absolutely beautiful. And she must have been. Like even though she's 65, she must have been stunning because as the story goes on, Pharaoh's people did notice her. And there's like this Jewish fable that says that Sarai was the most beautiful woman ever born in the history of mankind. Now, we don't know that to be true because no one knows what she looked like, but it's this fable. Like, she was so beautiful that everywhere she went, she just turned heads. So that's okay. Yeah, Sarah, you're a beautiful woman. How about when we go to Egypt, you tell everybody that you're my sister, which of course is half true because we're told in Genesis 20, Sarai is also the daughter of Terah from another mother. So they're half brother and sister. So there's that half truth, but we know it's a deception. So, I think it would have said something like this. Now, listen, Sarah, I know this isn't a great idea. However, if you don't do this, they will kill me. And then you'll be by yourself. You don't want that, do you? So, I mean, what a terrible idea. Giving your wife to another man. I just read we can read over these stories sometimes and miss how incredibly terrible some of these things are. I mean, what a terrible idea. And it was so selfish. He was just thinking about his own neck. Remember, he's looking at, I'll be killed. That's all he's concerned about. He doesn't care what's going to happen to his wife as long as I survive. And again, no trust in God whatsoever. Well, what's the consequence of this? When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarah was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's official saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his place. He treated Abram well, and for her sake, Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. Now at this stage, apart from the fact that his wife's living somewhere else in a harem, Abram's like, see, good idea. I kept my life, and look what I've been given. I've been giving all of these cattle. Seemed like a great idea. And he saved his neck, and now he's a wealthy man. He's happy. But what was the long-term plan? How was this going to work? God came to him and said, you're going to be the father of many descendants, as many as the stars in the sky. With who? He just gave his wife away. And how's he going to get his wife back, by the way? Kings don't give women back. Once their usefulness is been outlived, they go to a part of the harem where they're usually looked after by others and put out to pasture, so to speak. That's their lot, and they live out their life, the rest of their life there. They're not given back. Kings don't give things back. But rarely does life go good if we turn our back on God. It might for a season, and certainly in this season of life it seemed to go quite well. But then we read on. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me, he said. Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? So I took her to be my wife. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything that they had. Well, what's incredible about this story is that God used Abram's foolishness for his own purpose. Remember last week we spoke about the fact that God made a covenantal, a promise, an unconditional promise to Abram. It was unconditional. He said, I am going to make you a great nation. But he didn't say this, but basically God's thinking, I know you're going to take some wrong turns, but I've made a promise to you, and that is what is going to happen. Now, the only way you could explain this couple of verses is that God is sovereign. When Pharaoh found out that he'd been lied to, you would expect that he just would have executed Abram, taken everything back that he gave to him, and took back for himself. But he doesn't. He gives him his wife back, who certainly wouldn't have been involved physically with anyone, because they go through a process usually of becoming the wife, as you see in the story of Esther. Gives her back, gives all his cattle and everything that he's given, and sends them off. So God uses his foolishness. The encouraging thing about this story is that as we go on and work our way through Genesis, you'll see that Abram improves. He gets better, because when we get to the story of sacrificing his son Isaac, he trusts God implicitly, completely. He doesn't go, no, I don't want to do that. He trusts God. So here's a work in progress, and that should be an encouragement for us too. We are all a work in progress. We're not there yet, and we'll never get there wherever there is, but we're all a work in progress. Well, we're talking about leading by example. And how did Abram go? Not very good. I mean, his family had a long line of dysfunction in his family. It just repeated over and over. And then, of course, you might be familiar with this. His son Isaac did exactly the same thing. We go to Genesis 26. Now there was a famine in the land. Does this sound familiar? Besides a previous famine in Abram's time, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." I wonder where he got that idea from. Well, what we do matters. And I asked the question, do you think you're a person of influence? And I said, perhaps if you think maybe you're not, then you get a free pass. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how you act, doesn't matter how you live, because you're not going to affect anybody. Well, some questions that I ask, I don't know how you're going to answer, and I don't know what the answer is. But the answer to this question is yes. Are you a person of influence? The answer is yes. Every single human being on this planet is a person of influence. Or perhaps I should ask the question this way, which is, in your life, how many people will you influence? Have you ever thought about this? If you were to come up with a number, if I said to you, right, I want you to jot down in your life, up to this point of your life, how many people do you think you have influenced, whether it be great or small? I wonder what your answer would be. I reckon that'd be a fascinating question. I should do a survey on that. I wonder what you would think. Well, according to anthropologists and sociologists, that if you live to the average age, and average age apparently is 73 or thereabouts, so if you're over 73, good for you. Apparently, according to anthropologists and sociologists, in our life, if we live to 73, we will influence thousands of people. And you're thinking, come on, that's ridiculous. Thousands? Like me, like you might think, I'm not going to influence thousands of people. Well, how do we get to this number? Well, this is how the first time I heard this and read this, I went, really? And then over the years, I've paid attention to this, and this is how it works. And it's broken up into 5 categories of how you will influence other people. The first is your inner circle or your core circle. And there's approximately 5 people in that. This is your spouse, your best friends and your closest family. Those people who you are doing life with day in, day out. How you live impacts them deeply. And I suppose the influence gets less as you go out, but it is influence nonetheless. Then there's what's referred to as your active social group. This is approximately 150 people. This is based on the anthropologist Robin Dunbar's. It's called the Dunbar number. And the Dunbar number says that it's impossible for your brain to have more than 150 friends that you are constantly dealing with and in friendship with. Now you see over life how friends come and go. Like if you got married today, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing that I'm saying, but if you got married today, who came to your wedding would be completely different to who came to your wedding when you got married originally. Because your whole sphere and your whole life has changed and different. So Dunbar says it's impossible for you to have really more than 150 meaningful relationships. Which is funny because you go on Facebook and people say, oh, I've got 3,000 friends. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have 3,000 friends. There's 3,000 people who have clicked on you. That's not friendship. And then it goes on, and then we go to the wider network. This is about 500 to 1,500. This is acquaintances, casual friends, former co-workers, and people you know by name. Oh, yes, I know that person. I met them years ago, or I grew up with them, or I used to work with them. People you know. You may have a lasting but less frequent impact on their lives. A lasting but less frequent impact. And then we keep going, and we're going on to the met total. People you have met. How many people in your life have you met? Thousands. Can you remember those? No? Most of them? You know, it's always about unsettling when you talk to someone and say, "Oh, hi, we haven't met," and they go, "Yes, we have," and you go, "Oh, sorry." It's embarrassing, isn't it? Because you've forgotten. But we have these interactions all the time. So you will physically encounter or briefly interact with thousands of people in your lifetime. Every simple interaction, from holding a door to a passing conversation, leaves a small, seemingly insignificant mark. Seemingly insignificant. Now, there is this urban myth, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard this a few times, and it surrounds this apparent person who lived in San Francisco, and they'd had enough of life and they wanted to take their own life. They walked to San Francisco Bridge and they jumped off, which is apparently a pretty common thing to happen on that bridge. When the police went back to his apartment, they found a note. And the note wrote, and again, this may be a legend, I don't know. And the note said, I had enough of life. I'm going to walk to the Golden Gate Bridge and throw myself off. If one person smiles to me between here and the bridge, I won't do it. One person. Now, that might be a made-up story. But you know, sometimes the tiniest little interactions with people make a difference. Do you know how we interact with people in a shop that we don't know? If you act rudely at a shop, you upset that person, they're upset, they go home, they have an argument in their family, and the ripples go on. And I'm going to get to the ripples in a second, which is next. And this is called the ripple effect. And the ripple effect approximately affects about 10,000 people plus. Now, because social influence ripples outwards, if every person you significantly influence impacts just 10 others. In other words, if you, like I just said, I upset the person in the shop, they go and they upset 10 people because they're upset. Right? How we treat other people goes way beyond ourselves. Our sphere of influence isn't only who we see and who we interact with. It goes way beyond that. Now, I reckon this is really well exemplified with divorce. I come from divorce. My parents are divorced, and I personally am divorced, as is Lisa. Now, not by my own choice, and if you want to know my story, I'm very happy to talk to you one-on-one about my story. I'm very open about it. We're very open about our stories. Divorce is like dropping a rock in a pond and watching those ripples go, because it just doesn't affect the people in that immediate family. It is generational. It's really obvious at things like weddings and funerals. And for anyone who's been in a situation who is divorced with children, you will know how difficult this is. So the influence of what happens in that one act of divorce can go through generations. Now, Exodus 20 verse 6 is actually a very interesting verse that doesn't get a lot of airtime. Who knows the second commandment? Don't work a graven image. Don't bow to another image. We hear that and that's fine. But do you know what's tacked on the end of that? Do you know what the rest of that commandment is? It's this. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected. Even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. In the third and fourth generation. I look at that with divorce. It goes down the line. It goes through generations to kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. It's messy and it's difficult. And then it goes on. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. This isn't a promise, this is a principle. They're very different. This is a principle. The principle is that what you do matters. In other words, parents who reject God often influence their children and grandchildren in the same direction. So the effects of sin can ripple through generations. And as well, parents who love God often pass on faith, values, and blessing to future generations so the effect of faithfulness can spread even further. Don't underestimate the ripples, these ripples that just go on and on and on. We don't know. We don't know what they do. So, how must we live? That first reading we had today, it can be quite confronting. How should we live? And I suppose you could answer that many ways. This is one way you could answer that. And I like how it says, doing good for the sake of the gospel. Here's what I find difficult sometimes to comprehend and for us to acknowledge. The moment that we say we are a Christian, we are saying to people, how I act is how a Christian acts. How I act is resembling Jesus. You look at me and I am an example of Christianity. Now, whether you like it or not, people look at you, evaluate you, and judge you as a Christian. You don't get a say in that. People just will. Oh, they're a Christian? Really? And they did this? Oh, boy, they're not a very good Christian. They said this. We are judged and evaluated, and we are representing Jesus. That's who we're representing. Just like if you work for a company and you're a sales rep, you are representing that company. Whatever you present is what they're going to think of the company. However you present as a Christian is what people think of Christianity. We should not take this lightly. It says, teach the older men to exercise self-control. Any older men in here? I'll let you decide that for yourself. Exercise self-control, to be worthy of respect and to live wisely. Another version says anger, control your anger. They must be sound faith and be filled with love and patience. Older men, have I just described you? Is this you? Self-control, worthy of respect, live wisely, sound faith and filled with the love and patience. Then it goes on. Similarly, teach the older women, won't say anything about that, to live in a way that honours God. They must not slander others or be heavy drinkers. Instead, they should teach others what is good. Those older women must train the younger women to love their husbands and their children, to live wisely, to be pure, to work in their homes, to do good, and to be submissive to their husbands. Then they will not bring shame on the word of God. Anyway, then it goes on. Well, do you see yourself as a person of influence? Well, you are. You are. And that's really my point. Whether you like it or not, you are a person of influence. And we look at this story, and it's hard for us to watch someone who is so revered to lead such a terrible example. And I think we can look at our lives, and obviously there's many things that we have done that we regret. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. I mean, just like at the time, Abram thought it was a good idea to go to Egypt and offload his wife to Pharaoh. At the time, he genuinely thought that was a good idea. But what we do matters. Every single one of us, what we do, how we live our life matters. We are being watched. We are being evaluated. And whether we like it or not, we are influencing other people's lives. And I think particularly Christian parents, particularly of children, I know many of us here who have children who aren't Christians. They're watching us. They are watching us and judging us. Sometimes very harshly and very critical. What example are we giving to those children? We have to be very mindful of our influence. We never know what interactions and influences we're going to impact other people. So, may you lead by example, regardless of your lot or situation in life. And I know some of you had difficult situations, I understand that. And may your life influence others positively and draw them to Christ, not away from him. Let me pray. Lord, we thank you for this story. Lord, we are encouraged by the folly of great people of the Bible. But Lord, you also show us that what we do matters. In this life now, what we do matters. Lord, I ask that we would be a great influence on those around us, whether we realise we are influential or not. Father, I pray that you give us a revelation that every single person that we encounter, we are showing Jesus, whether we feel that or not that we are. And Father, I pray this morning that we would know the influence that we have and be accountable to that in Jesus' name. Amen.